Ladies and gentlemen, a new version of Minecraft Java Edition, the long-awaited update Aquatic, has finally been released for real. My name is Sliced Lime, and in this video we're going to go through all of the major changes in this version. It's going to be quite a lot of stuff, let me tell you that. So I've split this video into a whole bunch of sections. Now sadly YouTube has removed the ability to put annotations clickable on the video, so if you want to head directly to a section, you can find a timecode link in the video description and in a pinned comment. So we're gonna go through the changes to the world generation first, then move on to hostile and passive mobs, blocks and items, gameplay changes, redstone and contraption changes, advancements, new sounds in this version, user interface changes, and some settings changes to round it all off. There are also several big background changes in this version, changes to the technology that drives the game, that is more interesting for modders and for map makers than it is for players in general. There's a new command parser system, there's a data pack system, and the world data format has been flattened. I won't be going through those in this video in detail, there will be other videos explaining those in details for those who are interested. This video will be long enough anyway. Also to note, there are huge amounts of bug fixes in this version that I won't be going through. If you want to find out all the nitty-gritty details for that, there are several hours of snapshot review videos from me for you to enjoy. And with that said, we are ready to dive into our first section. Let's start out talking about the changes to the world. The world generator that makes worlds inside of Minecraft has been remade for this version. It should be quicker and more customizable. The idea was to not have any changes to world generation happen, but some bugs were found in the process of remaking this thing, and it was impossible to retain the old behavior exactly. This means that especially around rivers and beaches you might see some changes to land masses. The one section of the world generation that has changed on purpose is in the ocean. This is the update Aquatic after all. The ocean has been split into several different biomes that occupy the same space that the ocean used to occupy. The new biomes are Frozen Ocean and Deep Frozen Ocean, Cold Ocean and Deep Cold Ocean, just plain old ocean and the deep ocean, lukewarm ocean and deep lukewarm ocean, as well as warm ocean. There's also a deep warm ocean in the game, but it doesn't generate naturally, so you can only use that in custom worlds. Together with this, the water color, the underwater visibility and fog changes per biome now. In warm ocean biomes you can now find coral reef generated. They are bustling underwater forests made out of new coral blocks, and you can also find the light sources here. We'll get into more details about these new blocks later on in the video. In Frozen Ocean you can now find icebergs. These also contain new blocks that we'll get into later on. Underwater you can now also find ravines. Ravines underwater work much like they do on land and in caves, but exposed lava becomes obsidian and also magma. And magma blocks that are exposed will create bubble columns. We'll get into how these work later. Underwater caves can now also be found, and they are flooded, so you can swim around and explore caves underwater. Another new thing that you can find underwater is underwater ruins, either of separate little structures or together as big sunken villages. They look a little bit different depending on which ocean biome they spawn in, and they can also be found slightly buried or even protruding above the ocean surface. In total there are 24 new structures, 12 of these for warm oceans and 12 of the normal, and 8 of them in total are considered big structures. Each of them can spawn with a different block palette as well, which provides even further variation. And that's not everything that you can find underwater. You can also find shipwrecks. They generate underwater in ocean and beach biomes, and they can spawn upright or upside down or even sideways. These also can use different block palettes to provide variation for the same structures. You can find them slightly buried, or they can also protrude from the ocean surface, and some of them are more or less intact, while other ones are broken down and disintegrated. In both of these types of structures you can now find loot chests. Among other treasure items, these treasure chests can also contain buried treasure maps, a new type of treasure map that leads to buried treasure chests. X marks the spot of course, and if you head to that location you'll have to dig to find yourself a new treasure chest. These buried treasure chests also contain various treasure loot, but one specific item can only be found in this one. It's a new item called the Heart of the Sea. We'll talk more about this later in the blocks and items section. Let's talk more about world settings and world options in the Create World screen. There's now a backup button in the Edit World screen, so you can now easily make a backup of your world. There's also an Optimize World button. Normally the game will upgrade your world as you play, which takes a little bit of performance. So if you want to do this up front instead, you can click the Optimize World button to have the game process all of your world. It will take some time to do, but then you should have better performance when you're in your world afterwards. In terms of world options when generating a world, there's no custom world option anymore. If you have an old custom world, that will be treated as a default world when opened, so you'll have the world still, but once you hit the limit of what you've explored, you will get new default world generation beyond that point. The new world generator is supposed to be more customizable, and the ability to make custom worlds with many more options will return in a future version. There's a new type of world in this version as well though. It's called the buffet world type. That makes a world with a combination of a different world generator and a biome. The world generators available are surface, caves, and floating islands, corresponding to Overworld, the Nether, and the End. Enough talking about the world generation, let's move on to hostile mobs in this version. There's a new mob called the Phantom. It is the monster of the night skies, as voted as a winner to be added to the game in Minecon Earth last year. The Phantom is an undead flying mob that spawns in high altitude, and it targets players with insomnia, targets players who haven't slept in a long time. If you kill a Phantom, it drops a new item called a Phantom Membrane. We'll get into that item as well later on. Undead mobs have changed their behavior around water. They now sink instead of swimming. Zombie mobs can also now drown. A drowning mob will shake, similar to how a villager zombie looks when you're converting it to a villager. The result of a zombie drowning depends on which type of zombie it is. A husk that drowns will become a zombie, and a zombie that drowns will become a new mob called the Drowned. So there's a new type of zombie in this version. It is called the Drowned, and it's a new type of undead mob that spawns underwater as well as being the result of zombies drowning. They commonly spawn in underwater ruins and can spawn anywhere on the ocean floor in darkness. Some of the drowned will spawn with a new weapon called the Trident as well, and if you get killed by a drowned, your death message will say, "Player name was impaled by drowned." If you kill them, they can drop a new item called a Nautilus Shell, and they can also drop the Trident that they were holding. Changes to passive mobs in the update Aquatic as well. Sea turtles have been added to the game. They spawn on beaches and like to swim around in the ocean as well. You can breed the turtles by feeding 2 of them seagrass. They will fall into lava mode like other mobs do, and then one of the turtles will get an egg into its inventory. Once it has that, it will make its way to its home beach where it was born, and once there it will lay between 1 and 4 eggs in the same block on the beach. These have 3 different stages before hatching, and once they hatch, baby turtles will crawl out and crawl towards the ocean. The eggs are fragile, it can be trampled, so be careful around them, and zombies also like going over and trampling turtle eggs. So if you want to have some baby turtles in your world, make sure you protect those fragile eggs. If you want to pick them up, that is possible, but only if you have Silk Touch on your tool. When a baby turtle grows up into an adult turtle, they will drop a new item called a Scute. We'll get into the Scutes later when we talk about blocks and items. Like many other mobs, turtles react to food in a similar way. The food for turtles is seagrass. Like I mentioned before, that is how you breed them. That is also how you get them to follow you, and how you make baby turtles grow into adults quicker. Another new marine animal in this version as well, the dolphin. Dolphins spawn in pods in any non-frozen ocean biome. They like to play with any floating items they find and will pick them up and throw them back out. They also like to jump out of the water and can even jump between different ponds of water. If you're in a boat, they like to follow you around. If you attack a dolphin, the entire pod will retaliate, just like wolves will attack as a pack. If you swim near a dolphin, you will get a new effect. It's called the Dolphin's Grace. What this does is increase your swim speed, and it does stack with other effects like Depth Strider, so you can get really quick underwater swimming with this one. If you feed a dolphin a raw fish, it will try to lead you to an underwater treasure. Once there, it will dive to it to mark that you have now found your treasure. If a dolphin gets stranded on land, it will jump around randomly to try to get back into water, but it does need hydration, so after 2 minutes out of the water, a dolphin will die. The update Aquatic also makes the fish in the game actual mobs. You can now see them swimming around in the ocean. There are 4 main versions of them. There are cod, salmon, pufferfish and tropical fish. And the tropical fish in and of themselves have 6 different patterns, 16 colors for the 2 different colors of that pattern and 2 different shapes, which leads to more than 3,000 different variations of fish. Cod will spawn in normal, cold and lukewarm oceans and the deep versions of those oceans. Pufferfish and tropical fish will spawn in lukewarm and warm oceans and the deep versions of those. And salmon will spawn in cold and frozen oceans, including the deep versions. Salmon can also spawn in normal and frozen rivers. If you kill a fish mob, it will drop the same fish as an item. Pufferfish are the only ones that will become aggressive. When you get too close to a pufferfish, they will puff up. And when they do so, they will inflict any player inside of a 5x5x5 block cube around the fish with 7 seconds of poison. And if you touch them in their puffed form, that will deal direct damage. After puffing up, they will slowly deflate to their normal shape. The behavior of the other types of fish, the cod, the salmon and the tropical fish, is to swim around in schools of fish, which contain up to 9 cod, 6 salmon, and 9 of the same type of tropical fish. In specific, salmon are also able to swim up waterfall. They will manage approximately 4 or 5 blocks up. If a fish mob ends up outside of water, they will flop around, jump randomly, try to get back into the water. If they're out of water for 10 seconds, they will start taking suffocation damage and die. Fish mobs can also be caught. If you have a bucket with water in it, you can right click on a fish mob to catch it and get a fish in a bucket. If you have a fish like this in a bucket, you can then place it back out, and any fish placed like this will never despawn. One more underwater mob change to note is that squids now have a squid ink defense. If you attack a squid, it will now shoot out a cloud of ink to try to hide and get away. Other passive mob changes in this version. Skeleton horses can now be ridden around in and underwater. They are undead mobs, so they will also sink. And talking about horses, there's a new horse model in this version. Let's move on and talk about the large amount of new blocks and items introduced in this version. Let's start underwater with all of the new things that generate there. Seagrass and tall seagrass can be found underwater and can be harvested and replaced. There's also kelp that can be harvested, and when you harvest one block, then all of the blocks above it will also drop, just like a sugarcane or a cactus. Kelp items can be dried in a furnace. Dried kelp is a food item as well, and eating one will restore 1 hunger, that is half a haunch on the meter, and 0.6 hunger saturation behind the scenes. Eating dried kelp, however, is faster than most other food items in the game. You can also craft with it. Putting 3x3 dried kelp will make a dried kelp block, which can then also be crafted back into dried kelp by breaking it apart, working much like a diamond block or an iron block. Dried kelp blocks are also a fuel for 20 items worth of smelting in a furnace that is 200 seconds or 2.5 times as long as a normal coal item will power the furnace. Another new underwater type of block is the coral block. You can find that in the coral reef spawning in warm oceans. Coral blocks need contact with the water on any one side in order to survive. If they don't have that, they will turn into dead coral. There are 5 different types. The blue type is called tube coral, the pink type is called brain coral, the purple type is called bubble coral, the red type is called fire coral, and the yellow type is called horn coral. You can break them with a pickaxe, but then you also get dead coral. You need silk touch on your pickaxe to get live corals. Together with the coral blocks, there are also coral fans. Coral fans also need to be placed inside of water and can be placed on top of or on the sides of blocks. And there are also coral plants also planted underwater. Both coral fans and corals exist in all 5 colors of corals, and coral fans also exist in a dead version. In addition to corals, you can also find sea pickles in coral reefs. Sea pickles exist in groups of up to 4 in a single block. They look different when placed underwater as opposed to above water. If you have them above water, they are missing the little central stem. When underwater, they give off light as well, and the light level they give off is relative to the number of pickles in the same block. If you hit them, they break instantly, and if you don't want to use them to light up the bottom of the ocean, you can also smelt them, and when you do so, they turn into green dye. Another new block that generates in this version is the blue ice blocks. You can find them in icebergs in frozen oceans, and there are new modes of crafting ice in this version as well. If you take 9 ice blocks, you can craft that into a packed ice block, and if you take 9 packed ice blocks, you can pack that into a blue ice block. Blue ice blocks have different acceleration and top speed than packed ice and normal ice. Let's get into new item drops in this version. Scutes are dropped when a turtle grows from being a baby into being an adult. You can pick this up and use 5 of them to craft a turtle shell. The shape of this craft is a helmet-shaped craft, and the turtle shell can also be used as a helmet. Wearing a turtle shell as a helmet does give you some armor, but it also has the unique effect of giving you water breathing. You get a 10-second water breathing all the time as long as you are not in water. Essentially, what this means is that when you go underwater wearing a turtle shell, you get 10 extra seconds of breath. The durability of a turtle shell is 276, which is more than any other type of armor except diamond. Turtle shells are not only armor, they can also be used for brewing. Adding a turtle shell to an awkward potion gets you a potion of the Turtle Master, level 1. This gives you slowness 4, but it also gives you resistance 3, and it lasts for 20 seconds. You can extend this as usual up to 40 seconds, or you can power it up to level 2 for slowness 6 and resistance 4. Of course, these can also be made into splash and lingering potions by the usual means. Another new drop in this version is Phantom Membranes. We spoke about this before when we talked about Phantoms. Phantom Membranes are the new item used to repair elytra wings. So you can no longer repair elytras in an anvil with leather, you instead need to use Phantom Membranes. Phantom Membranes as well are used for brewing. Adding a Phantom Membrane to an awkward potion will get you a potion of slow falling, which does exactly what it sounds like it would do. This lasts for 1.5 minutes by default, and you can extend it to 4 minutes. Another new item is the Heart of the Sea that can only be found in treasure chests, buried treasure chests to be specific. That has no use in and of itself, only for crafting, and you craft it together with another new item called the Nautilus Shell that can be fished up or dropped from killing the drowned. These two items together, a Heart of the Sea, surrounded by Nautilus shells, would give you a new item called a Conduit. The Conduit is a sort of underwater beacon. You can place it underwater only, and when you place it, it emits light at level 15. Normally it does nothing, but just like a beacon, it gets power depending on structures built around it, a multi-block structure if you will. The beacon is activated by building rings, square rings if you will. 3 rings are possible, 1 per axis, and there needs to be 1 water block in between the ring and the conduit. As for the material, it has to be any type of prismarine block or sea lantern. Once enough blocks have been placed, that is at least 1 ring, you will activate the conduit, which then grants you conduit power. The conduit power increases your underwater vision, gives you water breathing and mining haste. The more blocks you put in the rings, the further the reach of the conduit. It starts out at 32 blocks of range when you activate the conduit with 1 ring and increases up to 96 blocks for 3 complete rings. When you do have 3 complete rings, the conduit also activates a secondary effect where the eye opens and it hunts for hostile mobs. Any hostile mob within 8 blocks of the conduit will get hit by 2 hearts of damage every 2 seconds if they are in contact with water or in the rain. Conduits can be activated at any height or depth as long as they are in water, and another interesting property is that they are a constant permanent water source and the water in it cannot be absorbed by a sponge. A new weapon has been added in this version as well, and it's the Trident, an underwater thrown weapon. You can get it by killing the drowned that spawn with it, and once thrown you can pick it back up, but do take care, it can be picked up by mobs as well. The attack damage of the Trident is 9, that is 4.5 hearts if you hit someone with it in melee, and 8, that is 4 hearts of damage if you throw it at someone. The durability of the Trident is 251, and the only way to repair one is to combine a damaged Trident with another one. You can do that on an anvil or by crafting, but if you do it by crafting they will lose all of the enchantments. And speaking of enchantments, the trident can be enchanted with Unbreaking, Mending, Curse of Vanishing, as well as 4 trident-specific new enchants. They are Loyalty, Channeling, Riptide, and Impaling. The Impaling enchant is an extra damage boost enchant for Trident specifically. Each level of Impaling adds 2.5 extra damage to each hit. That's 1 1/4 of a heart, but only to certain mobs, being fish, squid, turtle, the drowned, guardians, elder guardians, and dolphins. The Loyalty enchantment on the Trident will make it return to you after you've thrown it and it's hit something. The Channeling enchantment will channel thunderstorms. That means that if you hit a mob and there's currently a thunderstorm going on, it will summon a lightning bolt to hit that mob as well. Of course, this means the mob must be exposed to the sky for it to work, and this must happen in a biome where there are storms, so there must be snow or rain available. And finally, the Riptide enchantment changes the trident so it's not thrown, but throws the player forwards. This means that the trident becomes both usable as a weapon, but also as a mode of transport. Higher levels of Riptide will launch you further, and it can be used as long as you are inside or touching water, which by the way also works when it is raining. Also to note, you cannot have Riptide on a trident if you already have a Loyalty or Channeling. Let's move out of the water and look at other new things in this version. You can craft the logs into bark blocks in this version. Bark blocks are like logs, but they have the bark texture on all sides. Putting 4 logs into a 2x2 pattern in a crafting window will give you 3 bark blocks as a return. That's not the only change to logs though, there are also stripped logs. These aren't crafted, you make them much like you make path blocks but with an axe. Right click while looking at a bark block or a log while holding an axe to create a stripped version of that. This stripped version works exactly the same as the log but has a unique appearance. More wood stuff, trapdoors, buttons and pressure plates now exist for all the different wood types, much like doors used to. There's also one new type of oak slab, that's the petrified oak slab. This has existed without a name in the game for quite a while. It's basically a slab that looks like it's made out of oak, but works like it was made out of stone in that it cannot ever burn. More new versions of things in this version. Slabs and stair versions now exist of all of the different types of prismarine blocks, and pumpkins have been changed to spawn in the world without a face. If you want a face on a pumpkin, you can use shears for that, and you get pumpkin seeds out of the deal, and a face on the side that you sheared. Another change to pumpkins is that pumpkins, carved pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns no longer required a solid base to be placed. That also goes for fence gates, you can now place them without a solid base as well. More block changes. Monster egg blocks are now called infested blocks, and they have a changed behavior. Instead of mining with a specific slower speed, they will now break instantly when you mine them. The behavior of chests have been changed. You can now place chests next to each other without them merging. You can also place several large chests of the same type next to each other. If you want to place 2 chests next to each other that would normally merge into a double chest, just hold down Shift when placing the second chest. Another change to block types. Huge mushroom stem blocks can now be Silk Touch mined, and all types of mushroom blocks are now available from the creative inventory. The placing of these have also changed. If you place 2 of the same types of mushroom blocks next to each other, the sides that touch will permanently change to showing the pore texture. More stuff available from the creative inventory. Smooth double slabs, farmland and path blocks are now all available from the creative inventory. And you can also get blank fireworks rocket from the miscellaneous group. Change to beds, they now get destroyed when their supporting blocks are destroyed, so you can't have a bed floating in mid-air anymore. Item frames can now be placed on top or bottom of blocks, so you can now decorate ceilings and the floors with maps or other items. One final item has been added, and that is a debug only item, which means that you have to get it through commands, and it is the debug stick. This stick can be used to investigate and change individual block states of blocks, which means that you can also create combinations of block states that cannot normally happen in the game. Of course, this is meant as a debug use only, and for map making, use with care. You could create something that doesn't quite work the way you think it works. That was a whole boatload of new blocks and items. Let's talk about gameplay stuff as well. There's now a swimming animation. You can swim by sprinting when you are underwater. This puts you into a swimming state where you can swim through 1 block high gaps. Then when you come up for air, the air meter now refills gradually instead of all of your air bubbles popping in at once. More changes to the water mechanics in the game. Items will now float instead of sinking, and there are new bubble columns in the game. I mentioned this before when we spoke about underwater ravines. Bubble columns will form above any magma block, and that creates a column of bubbles that pulls items and entities downwards onto the magma block. If you drive a boat onto one of these bubble columns, it will start rocking, and if you stay in the bubble column when it does, it will actually sink the boat. You can also create a different type of bubble column by placing a soul sand block. This type of bubble column will propel entities and items upwards instead of pulling them downwards. Swimming into a bubble column will also refill your air meter. Light now reaches further underwater. Previously it used to decay 3 light levels per block, now it will instead only decay 1 light level per block. Underwater visibility is also lower than it was before normally, and it also changes with how long you've been inside of the water. The longer you've been in the water, the more your eyes will adjust. You can also get underwater visibility from the conduit, of course. Another major change to the water physics in the game is that blocks can now be waterlogged. That means that if you place a block into water or place a water directly onto a block, many non-full blocks like signs, fences, ladders, slabs, and stairs can now be waterlogged. That means they contain water, or that water and that block is on the same block space, if you will. Water will flow out from waterlogged blocks on any surface that the water inside of the block touches, and for other purposes the water will act much like water source blocks normally act. Do note that water will not flow into blocks and waterlog them, but they can flow out of them. However, water source blocks will spread in waterlogged states. If you move a waterlogged block with a piston, it will lose its waterlogged state. Another thing to note is that water and lava updates are no longer affected by random ticking. This means that in this version of the game, water and lava will always spread at exactly the same rate. There's now a furnace recipe book that can be used much in the same way that the crafting recipe book is. You open it by clicking the recipe book item when you have a furnace screen open, and it will show you recipes for what can be smelted in the furnace. Furnace recipes are learned in much the same way as crafting recipes are. Some of the random changes concerning gameplay. There's a new death message from dying in the nether or the end to a bed explosion. Sort of a joke about bugs reported to the tracker about this. Shulker boxes can now be undyed. If you have a dyed shulker box, you can click on a cauldron to get the undyed shulker box back. And there's also a separate undyed shulker box and a purple one. That means that what you get normally is a shulker box that is undyed, and dyeing it purple will give it a stronger, deeper purple tone. There are a bunch of changes to maps as well, and we'll start with the new functionality to add map markers. Marker can be added to a map by right-clicking with the map while looking at a banner. The banner base color becomes the map marker color, and if you've named the banner in an anvil, then that name will show up for that map marker. If you want to get rid of a map marker, then just right-click again on the same banner, or of course you can remove the banner from the world. On maps themselves, there are a number of changes to what shows up. Shulker boxes now show up on maps, and a number of blocks that used to only show up on maps when there were solid blocks below them now always show up on maps. These blocks include brewing stands, stained glass, cobblestone walls, trapdoors, fences, fence gates, beacons, daylight sensors, hoppers, slime blocks, and portal frames, cauldrons, and all types of chests. Glass blocks, glass panes, and iron bars no longer show up at all on maps though. And one final fix when it comes to visibility and gameplay, the hosting player's skin is now visible to players connecting to a client that has opened their game to LAN. There are not that many changes to redstone and contraptions in this version. It is a backend and water focused update. However, there are some, so let's go through those. Levers in the on mode now produce redstone particles, so you can see when a lever is on or not. Note blocks can now be pushed and pulled by pistons. XP in furnaces now stays in the furnace when you pull items out using hoppers. And mobs in minecarts no longer control the movement of that minecart. Let's talk about changes to advancements in this version. A number of new ones. Fishy business for catching a fish. Tactical fishing for catching a fish in a bucket. A throwaway joke for throwing a trident. very frightening for striking a village with lightning. There are also a bunch of changes to existing advancements. Sniper Duel has had its description updated to remove the specific requirements for shooting with an arrow. It's simply now killing a skeleton at a very far distance, so you can also do it with a trident. The A Furious Cocktail advancement has been updated to include the new potions, that is Turtle Master and Slow Falling, which means that you now also have to have a Resistance and Slow Falling to get a Furious Cocktail. A whole bunch of new effects are also added to the How Did We Get Here hidden advancement that is becoming ever more difficult to get. That now also includes Slow Falling and Dolphin's Grace. And one final thing to note, advancement descriptions are now colored. That is green colored text for normal advancement and purple colored text for challenges. Let's talk about new sounds and sound changes in this version. There are new ambient sounds for being underwater. There are new sounds for placing seagrass and coral blocks. Of course, the fish mobs have new sounds. The pufferfish has a sound specifically for stinging them. There are sounds for dolphins. Turtles have new sounds. And phantoms have new sounds. There are sound effects for the conduit activating and being active. There are new sounds for beacon activating and being active. There are sounds for entering a bubble column. And there are sounds for husks drowning and zombies drowning. And of course there are specific sounds for the drowned. And there are several new tracks of music added in this version. A noteworthy bug fix for sounds for a bug that has been in the game for more than 5 years as well. Minecarts no longer play the minecart roll sound when loading in. Let's talk about some interface functionality. The main menu backdrop has been updated and now shows an underwater Update Aquatic one. The statistics screen now shows blocks that only differed by data value, so now it contains the different stone variants instead of just stone, for instance. The font rendering has been changed in the game. Many players will probably not notice this at all, but hopefully what it should mean is that some special characters for certain other languages will be easier to read. There are 2 new functions for the debug screen as well. If you hit F3 and C, it will copy your current location to the clipboard as a teleport command. And if you hit F3 and I when you are looking at a block or an entity with NBT attached to it, it will copy that to the clipboard. And let's round off by talking about some settings. The biome blend distance has been added to the video options. It controls how sharp the change is when moving from one colored biome to another one. There's also a full screen mode that defaults to windowed borderless now, which should make it easier to switch in and out of the game. And there's a full screen resolution slider inside of the video settings. The user interface scale option has been extended, so it should be easier to get a user interface that scales to be usable even on very high resolutions like 4K monitors. And one thing to mention that is only in the options.txt file, not in the settings screen itself, is that there is a mouse wheel sensitivity setting that you can use to change how quickly your mouse wheel scrolls through your hotbar items. And that gets us to the end of a very long list of changes for Minecraft 1.13, the update, Aquatic. If you haven't changed anything in specific in your Minecraft launcher, and if you're using the normal actual launcher for the game, then you shouldn't have to do anything specific to get this version running. If you're using profiles, then just select the latest release profile and you should get this version automatically. Thank you for watching all the way to the end of this very long video. I hope you found it helpful, and if you did, please help me out in return and leave a like. My name is Sliced Lime. If you liked this video, please consider subscribing to my channel, where you can always find comprehensive looks on all of the latest Minecraft news. And that was all. Thank you again for watching, and I will see you in another video. Take care. Bye bye.